From the moment Alex opened his eyes that morning, he felt a strange weight pressing on his chest, a mixture of longing, frustration, and a silent demand from life itself. For years, he had dreamed of success, of a life where he could look in the mirror and feel proud, where every effort he put in bore fruit. Yet every morning, those dreams seemed to drift further away, like clouds moving past a window he could never reach. He had made countless promises to himself, whispered vows in the quiet of the night, telling himself that tomorrow would be different, that tomorrow he would start, that tomorrow he would finally act. But tomorrow always arrived with the same excuses, the same hesitation, the same inertia that kept him locked in place. This morning, though, something inside him shifted. Something that had been dormant, buried under years of doubt and procrastination, suddenly stirred and demanded attention. Today, he would not wait for motivation. Today, he would force himself to act, to move, to become the person capable of achieving his dreams. He began with small steps, knowing that the path to greatness often starts with the tiniest movements. He rose an hour earlier than usual, feeling the cold bite of the morning air as he stepped outside for a run. His muscles protested, his lungs burned, but he pushed through, reminding himself that discomfort was a companion on the journey to success. Back inside, he took a notebook and wrote down every single goal he had ever wanted to achieve, from the smallest personal victories to the grandest life ambitions. Each goal, written in ink, felt like a promise, a contract with himself that he could no longer ignore. His hands shook slightly as he wrote, not from weakness but from the intensity of realizing that action, not desire, was the only way forward. Every item on that page was a challenge, a mountain he was committing to climb, and for the first time, the idea of climbing no longer terrified him. It excited him. As the day progressed, Alex discovered that forcing himself to start was only the beginning. The real battle lay in maintaining momentum, in confronting the doubts and fears that had sabotaged him for years. His mind whispered cruel questions, testing his resolve. Was he really capable? Was he wasting his time? Had he left it too late to achieve anything meaningful? Every whisper was met with a conscious decision to act anyway. He tackled tasks he had long avoided, projects that had seemed too daunting, conversations he had postponed. At every step, he felt the familiar pull of comfort, the seductive voice of excuses, but he refused to yield. He realized that waiting for inspiration was futile. Inspiration only appeared when action demanded it. The act of doing, of forcing himself forward, generated a momentum that slowly began to replace fear with confidence. By the afternoon, Alex encountered the first true test of his resolve. A project he had been hesitant to start revealed layers of complexity he had not anticipated. Problems arose, setbacks appeared, and frustration threatened to derail his focus. In the past, such challenges would have been enough to stop him, to convince him that he was not ready, that he was not capable. But now, something had changed. He met every difficulty with determination, analyzing each obstacle, breaking it down into manageable pieces, and attacking it systematically. He learned to see failure not as a final verdict but as a teacher, one that offered lessons disguised as disappointment. Every mistake became an opportunity to refine his approach, to strengthen his skills, and to remind himself that no journey worth taking was free of hardship. With each obstacle overcome, his confidence grew, not arrogantly, but steadily, like a river cutting through stone over time. Evening came, bringing a sense of exhaustion that threatened to make him falter. His body ached from movement, his mind was heavy with decisions, yet he forced himself to continue. He returned to his notebook, reviewing the goals he had set that morning, adding new insights, correcting errors, and planning his next steps. The simple act of writing and reflecting became a ritual, a way to reinforce commitment to himself. He realized that the discipline he was cultivating was more than just a tool for achieving goals, it was transforming him into someone who could endure, persevere, and thrive despite adversity. He began to feel a quiet pride, a subtle but powerful satisfaction that came not from success itself, but from the conscious effort to persist in the face of resistance. By nightfall, Alex reflected on the journey of just one day and understood a truth he had never fully grasped before: motivation alone was unreliable, fleeting, and often deceptive. True progress came from forcing oneself into action, from creating habits that did not depend on feelings, from building momentum that no fleeting emotion could destroy. He felt a sense of empowerment he had never known, a recognition that he was no longer at the mercy of his own hesitation. He had taken control, not through inspiration, but through relentless, deliberate action. Every small victory of the day reinforced the principle that the power to change, to grow, to succeed, was already within him. It had simply required his conscious decision to activate it. As Alex lay down that night, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration. His body was tired, yes, but his spirit felt alive in a way it had not for years. He had confronted himself, faced his fears, and acted anyway. The journey had only begun, but he knew the foundation had been laid. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubts, new moments where he would need to push himself even harder, but he was ready. The first day of real action had proven to him that he could endure, he could fight, and he could grow stronger with every step. Success was not a distant dream, it was a path he could carve for himself, one deliberate action at a time. And in that realization, he found a quiet certainty. If he could force himself to start today, he could force himself to achieve anything. The morning light would return, and with it, new tasks, new trials, and new victories. But Alex no longer feared them. He understood now that the fire of determination was not something that appeared magically, it was something that burned brightest when he chose to feed it with action, perseverance, and the refusal to give up. The person he was yesterday was not the person he would be tomorrow. Tomorrow, he would be stronger, more disciplined, and closer to the life he had always imagined. He smiled, knowing that forcing oneself into action was not a punishment, it was the key to freedom, the gateway to dreams, and the secret to achieving any goal. And with that thought, he drifted into a deep sleep, ready to wake up and do it all over again, knowing that the real journey of success had only just begun. The morning after his first day of discipline, Alex woke with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. He knew that the real challenge was only beginning. It was one thing to force himself into action for a single day, but sustaining that momentum, facing the setbacks and obstacles that life would inevitably throw at him, was another battle entirely. Yet, he felt a quiet determination deep in his core. The sensation was unfamiliar, almost electric, like a current running through his veins, demanding that he step beyond the safety of routine and push into the uncomfortable, the unknown. Today, he decided, he would confront the real obstacles, not just the imagined ones in his mind. Today, he would test the limits of his own will. He began by reviewing the goals he had written down the day before. Each item seemed larger now, more daunting. The projects he had procrastinated on for years stared back at him like mountains waiting to be climbed. His mind, sensing the enormity of the task, began to whisper its usual doubts. "Are you really capable of this?" it asked. "What if you fail again? What if you waste your time?" For a moment, Alex felt the familiar tug of fear, the pull of giving up before even trying. But then he remembered the lesson from the previous day: motivation does not come before action, it comes during it. He reminded himself that every step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. He forced himself to focus on what he could control: his effort, his attitude, and his willingness to persist. The first obstacle of the day came sooner than he expected. A task that seemed simple the night before had revealed hidden complexities. Software crashed, data was missing, and mistakes that he thought were trivial turned into significant setbacks. In the past, Alex would have thrown up his hands, convinced that he was doomed to failure, and retreated into excuses. Today, however, he took a deep breath and reminded himself that obstacles were not signals to stop, they were tests of strength, courage, and persistence. He broke the problem into smaller, manageable parts, tackling each piece methodically. Every solution he found, every step he completed, built a momentum that fueled him to move faster and with more confidence. He began to see the pattern: failure and setbacks were not enemies, they were guides, teaching him patience, strategy, and resilience. By mid-morning, Alex encountered another challenge, one that was not external but internal. His mind began to rebel against the discipline he was trying to enforce. Fatigue crept in, self-doubt lingered, and the temptation to slack off called to him like a siren. He felt the urge to procrastinate, to postpone the hard work until tomorrow. But Alex had learned a critical truth: the mind would always try to avoid discomfort, and the difference between success and failure was the ability to act despite it. He forced himself to rise, to continue, to push through the mental resistance that sought to keep him safe but stagnant. Every step he took against the pull of hesitation strengthened his mental muscles, and he felt a growing confidence that he had never experienced before. As the day continued, Alex began to notice subtle changes in the way he approached challenges. He no longer saw them as threats, but as opportunities to prove himself, to grow stronger, and to demonstrate that he could overcome anything. Each problem solved, each obstacle faced, became a testament to his persistence. He realized that forcing himself to act was not merely about completing tasks, it was about transforming himself into the kind of person who could achieve his goals. The discipline, resilience, and courage he cultivated in the process were the true victories, far more valuable than the completion of any single project. By afternoon, Alex faced perhaps the hardest test yet. A major setback occurred in one of his long-term goals, something that could have undone weeks of effort if he allowed it. The natural response would have been frustration, anger, or even despair. Many would have quit at this moment, telling themselves that the odds were too high, that success was impossible. But Alex had begun to see life differently. He understood that failure was not the end, but a step in the journey. He forced himself to remain calm, to assess the situation objectively, and to take action where he could. Step by step, he corrected errors, adapted his plan, and refused to let the setback define him. In doing so, he discovered an unexpected truth. Resilience grows not in comfort, but in the face of adversity. The harder the challenge, the greater the strength gained in overcoming it. Evening brought reflection. Alex sat quietly, reviewing the day and noting every victory, no matter how small. Each completed task, each obstacle overcome, each moment when he acted despite fear or doubt was recorded in his mind as evidence of his growth. He realized that forcing oneself to act was a practice in patience, persistence, and self-belief. The victories were not always visible to others, but they were deeply transformative, changing the way he saw himself and the world around him. He began to feel an inner power, a quiet assurance that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had the strength to face them. He was becoming a person who did not wait for life to happen, but a person who made life happen through relentless action. That night, Alex understood something profound. The journey toward any goal was not about luck, talent, or waiting for perfect circumstances. It was about consistency, discipline, and the willingness to act even when fear and doubt loomed large. He realized that the moments of discomfort, the struggles against procrastination, the challenges that seemed insurmountable, all of these were the true markers of progress. They were evidence that he was evolving, becoming stronger, more capable, and more determined. The power to achieve any goal was not an abstract concept, it was already within him, waiting to be activated by action and persistence. As he drifted to sleep, Alex felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond any single achievement. The day had tested him in ways he had not anticipated, pushed him beyond his comfort zone, and demanded more of him than he thought he had to give. Yet he had responded, acted, and persevered. The journey was far from over, but he had proven to himself that he could meet life's challenges head-on. He knew that the real test was not in reaching a single goal, but in sustaining the courage, discipline, and relentless action required to achieve any goal, no matter how ambitious. And in that understanding, he found a quiet confidence. As long as he forced himself to act, to persist, and to refuse to give up, there was nothing he could not accomplish. Tomorrow would bring new obstacles, new doubts, and new challenges, but Alex was ready. He had discovered the secret that many never learn: success does not come to those who wait for inspiration, it comes to those who act, persist, and refuse to be stopped by fear or discomfort. The power to achieve anything was his, and he would wield it every day, one deliberate action at a time. And with that thought, he closed his eyes, knowing that each day of action brought him closer to the life he had always dreamed of. By the third day of his relentless pursuit, Alex began to notice a shift within himself that he had never experienced before. The physical strain of waking early, running, working, and focusing intensely had started to transform from a burden into a source of power. What once felt like exhaustion now carried with it a strange exhilaration, a sense that every ounce of effort was shaping him into a version of himself he had only imagined in dreams. The small victories of the past 2 days had compounded, giving him a momentum that was almost unstoppable, yet he knew that the real test of his determination was only beginning. The world would not pause to accommodate his goals, and the journey toward achievement demanded more than just action. It demanded persistence beyond comfort, beyond fear, and beyond every excuse he had ever used to avoid effort. That morning, Alex reviewed the goals he had been pursuing, realizing that each one represented not just an objective but a challenge to his very limits. Some were professional, some personal, and some deeply emotional, requiring him to confront fears he had long ignored. His mind, always quick to calculate risks and imagine failure, tried once more to convince him that the task was too great, that the effort might not be worth it. But Alex had learned a powerful truth: progress is forged in spite of fear, not in its absence. He reminded himself that action was the antidote to doubt. With every heartbeat, every conscious decision to move forward, he reinforced the inner certainty that he could handle whatever obstacles arose. The path ahead would be difficult, but it was a path he was ready to walk, one deliberate step at a time. As the day unfolded, Alex faced a series of challenges that would have paralyzed him in the past. Projects he had underestimated revealed hidden complexities, forcing him to adapt quickly, think critically, and act decisively. Each problem demanded his full attention, pushing him to strategize, innovate, and sometimes fail before finding a solution. Yet with each failure, he no longer felt defeated. Instead, he felt a growing confidence, an understanding that mistakes were not signs of weakness but proof that he was attempting something meaningful. The discomfort he had once feared became a tool, sharpening his focus and teaching him resilience. He began to see that the journey toward any goal was less about the destination and more about the transformation that occurred along the way. Each trial, each challenge, each moment of doubt conquered was molding him into someone capable of achieving the extraordinary. By mid-afternoon, Alex noticed another profound change: the way people responded to him had begun to shift. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers seemed to recognize the quiet intensity in his demeanor, the unwavering focus that radiated from every action he took. Doors began to open in ways that had once seemed impossible. Opportunities he had only dreamed of appeared within reach, but he understood that external recognition was fleeting and unreliable. What mattered most was the inner transformation, the growing mastery over his own mind, the ability to force himself to act when motivation wavered, and the persistence to continue when obstacles loomed. This realization was both humbling and empowering, teaching him that true success was rooted not in luck or timing, but in relentless, deliberate effort. As the evening approached, Alex faced what felt like the ultimate test of his resolve. A challenge emerged that combined every difficulty he had encountered so far: complexity, pressure, and personal stakes. His first instinct was to panic, to question his ability, and to consider stepping back. But he caught himself, remembering the lessons of the past days: fear was temporary, effort was permanent, and action was always the antidote to doubt. He attacked the problem methodically, breaking it down, analyzing it, and confronting each piece with unwavering focus. The hours stretched on, and fatigue pressed heavily against him, but he refused to stop. Every breakthrough fueled him, every small victory reinforced his belief in his own strength. By the time he reached a solution, Alex felt a profound sense of accomplishment that went beyond the completion of a task. He had confronted the limits of his own endurance, and in doing so, discovered a deeper reservoir of strength he had never known existed. Nightfall brought quiet reflection, and Alex allowed himself a moment to fully grasp the magnitude of his journey so far. The relentless effort, the conscious decision to act despite fear and fatigue, had begun to reshape him fundamentally. He realized that achieving goals was not about waiting for perfect circumstances or hoping for motivation to strike. It was about creating conditions for success through discipline, resilience, and the courage to act consistently. Every action taken, every obstacle faced, and every moment he had pushed beyond comfort had transformed him into a person capable of achieving what once seemed impossible. The journey was not easy, but it was proving that greatness was forged through persistence and deliberate action, not by luck or fleeting inspiration. By the fourth day, Alex had already begun to notice profound changes in himself, changes that went far beyond mere productivity or completed tasks. The muscles of his body were growing stronger, yes, but more importantly, the muscles of his mind were flexing in ways he had never imagined. His focus, once fragile and easily distracted, had become sharp and unwavering. His resolve, once timid and hesitant, had transformed into a steady force that refused to yield, no matter what obstacles appeared. Yet, despite the visible progress, Alex knew that the hardest challenges often came not from external circumstances, but from within. Temptation, doubt, fear, and exhaustion all collided at once, testing whether the discipline he had built was strong enough to endure real-life pressure. Today, he decided, he would confront those internal storms head-on. From the moment he awoke, the weight of responsibility and expectation pressed on him. Every goal, every project, every aspiration seemed to demand more than ever before. Tasks that had once felt manageable now appeared as mountains to climb, with peaks hidden by clouds of uncertainty. His mind began its usual chatter, "You're tired. You deserve rest. Maybe tomorrow will be easier." But Alex had learned to recognize these whispers for what they were, the mind's natural resistance to discomfort. He forced himself to act despite the temptation to linger in comfort. Each deliberate step he took reinforced the truth he had discovered over the past days: action, no matter how difficult, is the only path to progress. The simple decision to continue, to confront the day fully, became a source of empowerment in itself. As the day progressed, Alex faced multiple challenges that tested his skills, patience, and endurance. A critical project revealed hidden flaws that required immediate correction. Deadlines loomed, and the pressure to perform perfectly threatened to overwhelm him. His initial instinct was to panic, but he remembered the lessons of persistence and discipline he had been cultivating. Breaking the task into smaller, manageable parts, he attacked each piece with meticulous focus. Every step completed, every obstacle overcome, was a small victory, reinforcing his confidence and proving to himself that setbacks were not failures, they were opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient. He discovered that challenges were not enemies to avoid, but teachers that demanded his best effort and rewarded him with growth. By afternoon, the test became not about projects, but about life itself. Personal responsibilities, unexpected demands, and emotional pressures all collided at once. It would have been easy to give in, to let circumstances dictate his energy and focus. Yet Alex forced himself to maintain control, to prioritize, and to act decisively in every situation. He realized that discipline was not just about work, it was about mastering the self, about refusing to be ruled by fleeting emotions, and about cultivating the ability to remain steady under pressure. Each choice to act deliberately, even when exhausted or distracted, strengthened the foundation of his resilience. He began to see that the real obstacle to achieving any goal was not external events, but the inner battles that must be won daily. By late afternoon, fatigue pressed heavily on him. His body ached, his mind felt drained, yet he pushed on, knowing that the greatest growth often came when he had nothing left to give. Motivation, he realized, was irrelevant. He had discovered that true strength emerges when one acts without relying on it. He forced himself to tackle difficult decisions, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to complete tasks that required patience and careful thought. With every deliberate action, he felt an invisible power building within him, a force born of persistence, courage, and refusal to give in. He began to understand that mastery over oneself was far more valuable than mastery over circumstances. The person who could remain disciplined in the face of temptation, persistent in the face of fatigue, and unwavering in the face of doubt would always achieve more than someone who waited for perfect conditions. Evening brought a new kind of challenge, introspection. Alex reflected on the journey of the past days, realizing how far he had come and yet understanding how far he still had to go. He saw clearly the moments when he had been tempted to give up, when fear and doubt had whispered in his ear, when his body and mind had begged for rest, and yet he had persisted. Each of these moments had strengthened him in ways he could not have imagined, teaching him that true growth comes not from avoiding discomfort but from embracing it fully. He realized that every struggle, every decision to act despite resistance, was building an inner fortitude that could not be shaken by external events. This realization filled him with quiet confidence and a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the person he was becoming was capable of enduring anything life could throw at him. By nightfall, Alex faced one final test of the day. A major problem emerged unexpectedly, combining elements of complexity, urgency, and emotional stress. It would have been easy to let panic, frustration, or despair take over, but Alex had learned to respond differently. He forced himself to breathe, to think clearly, and to approach the situation with calm determination. Step by step, he worked through the problem, refusing to be intimidated or distracted. Hours passed, but he persisted, relying on the discipline, focus, and resilience he had cultivated over the past days. When the challenge was finally resolved, he felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment, not just because the task was completed, but because he had proven to himself once again that he could act decisively and persistently, no matter how difficult the circumstances. As he prepared to sleep, Alex reflected deeply on the lessons of the day. He realized that the real journey of achieving goals is not a straight line. It is filled with obstacles, distractions, temptations, and moments of doubt. The person who succeeds is not the one who never faces difficulty, but the one who acts in spite of it. By forcing himself to act, even when exhausted, even when uncertain, Alex had built a level of self-mastery and resilience that would serve him for the rest of his life. He understood that each day of persistent action was a step toward becoming the kind of person who could achieve any goal, no matter how ambitious. The challenges of today had become the strength of tomorrow, and the power to succeed was no longer a distant hope, it was a living reality within him. Finally, as Alex lay down, exhaustion and triumph intertwined in his mind and body. The physical and mental strain had been immense, yet he felt stronger, more capable, and more determined than ever. He knew the journey ahead would continue to test him, presenting obstacles far greater than those he had already faced. Yet he was ready. The discipline, persistence, and courage he had cultivated were no longer external habits, they had become part of his identity. He understood now that achieving any goal requires more than desire or talent, it requires the relentless commitment to act, the willingness to endure discomfort, and the unshakable belief in one's own strength. And with that knowledge, Alex drifted into sleep, knowing that no matter what tomorrow held, he was prepared, unstoppable, and destined to achieve what he had once thought impossible. By the fifth day, Alex felt a strength he had never experienced before. It was not the strength of his muscles, nor the fleeting energy that comes from motivation, but a deep, unshakable power within, a force born of persistence, discipline, and the conscious decision to act no matter the circumstances. The journey had tested him in ways he could never have predicted, pushing him to his limits physically, mentally, and emotionally. Each obstacle, each moment of doubt, each temptation to quit had been a step on a path that had transformed him into someone far stronger than the person who had begun this journey merely 5 days ago. The dreams that once seemed distant and impossible now felt within reach, not because the world had changed, but because he had changed. He had become the person capable of achieving them. The day began with reflection. Alex reviewed the progress he had made over the past days, remembering the moments when he had been exhausted yet forced himself to act, when fear had whispered to stop yet he pressed forward, when mistakes threatened to overwhelm yet he learned from them instead. Each memory reinforced the reality that the person who acts despite resistance is the person who succeeds. He understood now that the secret to achieving any goal was not waiting for perfect conditions, inspiration, or confidence, but taking consistent action, forcing oneself to persist, and refusing to surrender to hesitation or doubt. This knowledge filled him with a quiet certainty, a deep conviction that he could face any challenge life threw his way. He felt unstoppable because he had proven to himself that his will was stronger than any obstacle. As the day unfolded, Alex encountered the final challenges that would truly test his growth. A series of complex problems, unexpected delays, and high-pressure decisions demanded every ounce of his focus and energy. His mind, once quick to panic, now approached each challenge calmly, assessing, strategizing, and acting with deliberate intention. His body, once prone to fatigue and weakness, responded with resilience, pushing him forward even when he thought he could not go further. Every task completed, every problem solved, every fear confronted became a symbol of the transformation he had undergone. He realized that the journey itself, the struggle, the discipline, the deliberate effort, had been the true reward. The goals he pursued were no longer distant targets, they were natural consequences of the person he had become. By afternoon, Alex began to notice a profound shift in perspective. The external world, the obstacles, the deadlines, the pressures, had not changed. What had changed was him. He had cultivated a mindset that refused to be intimidated by difficulty, a spirit that embraced challenge as an opportunity rather than a threat, and a determination that did not waver in the face of adversity. He understood that true achievement was not about avoiding struggle, but about mastering oneself in spite of it. Every setback, every failure, every moment of doubt had contributed to this mastery. He felt a deep gratitude for the difficulties he had faced, knowing that they had forged his strength, sharpened his focus, and clarified his purpose. The journey had not been easy, but it had been transformative in ways he could never have imagined. Evening brought quiet reflection, a moment to internalize the lessons of the past 5 days. Alex realized that the power to achieve any goal had never been in external circumstances or fleeting motivation, it had always resided within him. The ability to act despite fear, to persist despite exhaustion, to remain disciplined despite temptation, had become a source of limitless strength. He recognized that this power was not temporary, it was a permanent part of who he had become. The person who had once hesitated, procrastinated, and doubted himself had been replaced by someone who could take on any challenge, endure any difficulty, and achieve any goal he set his mind to. This awareness was exhilarating, empowering, and deeply liberating. As night fell, Alex allowed himself to fully appreciate the journey he had undertaken. Each day had presented challenges that seemed insurmountable at the time, yet he had faced them with determination and courage. He had learned that success is not about waiting for opportunities or relying on luck, it is about creating conditions for success through consistent action, deliberate effort, and unwavering discipline. The victories of these past days were not simply the completion of tasks, but the evidence of transformation. He understood that the person capable of achieving greatness is not someone who never struggles, but someone who persists, learns, and grows stronger with each challenge faced. And in that realization, he found a sense of power and freedom that few ever experience, the knowledge that he was now, fundamentally, unstoppable. In the final hours of the day, Alex reflected on the broader meaning of his journey. He realized that life itself is a series of goals, obstacles, and moments of choice. The difference between those who achieve their dreams and those who do not is rarely talent, luck, or circumstance. It is the willingness to act, to persist, to overcome the resistance of the mind and body, and to refuse to surrender when faced with difficulty. By forcing himself to act consistently over these past days, Alex had tapped into a limitless source of strength and resilience that would carry him forward for the rest of his life. The lessons he had learned were universal: action conquers fear, persistence overcomes doubt, and discipline transforms potential into reality. As he prepared to sleep, Alex felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not because he had reached every goal, but because he had discovered the true nature of achievement. Goals were not merely endpoints, they were milestones along a journey of personal growth, self-mastery, and transformation. The real reward was not in external success, but in the development of character, resilience, and the unwavering belief in one's own abilities. He understood now that any goal, no matter how ambitious, could be achieved by the person willing to act relentlessly, persist through difficulty, and refuse to let fear, doubt, or discomfort dictate their actions. This realization was both humbling and empowering, filling him with a sense of purpose and direction that would guide him for the rest of his life. Finally, Alex allowed himself to rest, confident that he had reached a turning point. The transformation he had undergone over the past 5 days was profound, permanent, and life-changing. He had forced himself to act when he did not feel like it, to persist when he wanted to quit, and to confront fear when he wanted to hide. In doing so, he had unlocked a power within himself that could achieve anything. He understood now that success is not a matter of chance or convenience, it is the natural outcome of deliberate action, resilience, and the refusal to give up. And with that knowledge, Alex drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, knowing that he was no longer limited by hesitation, doubt, or fear. He had become unstoppable, capable of achieving any goal, and ready to face the world with the confidence of someone who knows that the greatest victory is the mastery of oneself.